Do you have a little brother or sister? How do you feel about them? Have you ever thought about what would happen if you were left alone without them? My name is Mark. I want to tell you about my sister, or rather, why I hated her. Usually, when another child is born in the family, it is groomed and cherished the most. And all because he is small. He is the youngest in the family, and accordingly, he needs more attention than the others. For me, it turned out very differently. When I was born, I wasn't the best. I didn't have any privileges. I didn't get snickered at. I didn't get more toys, and I didn't get more pocket money than my sister. She was more loved than I was. I had the feeling that she was younger than I was, although the age difference is 5 years. My sister's name is Alice. No, she's a good person and sometimes a good sister. Sometimes, when she was in a good mood, she would bring me home new toys, ice cream, or even give me money. But there were days when she looked awful and acted like a bitch. She could have thrown me out of the room and slammed the door in my face. I didn't understand why her parents didn't scold her at such times. Why did they punish me for any such outbursts? Was she on a special account? But why and how? I remember once I had a birthday, but my parents said that there was no money for the celebration. And I wanted this event so much. I waited a whole year to ask for a new skate as a gift. And then, such a bummer. Naturally, my mood fell. The next day passed as usual, and in the late afternoon, I noticed that my mother was packing a suitcase somewhere. When I asked where she was going, she said that she and Alice should go to another country, and then promised that they would return soon. What? Another country? But how? Why not me? Why her? Why does she always get the best of everything? So they don't have money for a new skate and cake, but they do have money to go to other countries? Why should I do all this? My heart was filled with hatred for Alice that night. I went to her bedroom, watched her pack her own things, and just silently hated her. I have often wondered why they should have another child if there is no place for it in their heart. This unloved, sometimes superfluous member of the family was me. As long as I can remember, I've been trying to figure out the secret of my sister's difference from me. And can everything be simpler? It's just that she's she and I'm I. This continued for several more years, and things got even worse. My parents almost stopped noticing me over the years. I was in the house like a shadow, and I had already learned not to talk to them much, and not to pay attention to the way they hung around this witch. I went to school, did my own homework, signed up for sports clubs, and made plans to get out of the house as soon as possible. Yes, I made a final decision for myself. They will be better off without me, or rather, they will not even notice my absence. I just needed to find a place to live and some part-time work for minors. I waited for the day when my mom and dad left on some business. They promised to return late at night. I picked up my duffel bag from under the bed and headed for the exit. As I was walking down the hall, Alice noticed me. "Hey Mark, where are you going?" she asked me. I was rude when I said it was none of her business. "What difference does it make? Do you care?" I shouted back. Alice made a surprised face, came up to me and asked why I was angry and rude to her. This question enraged me even more. I realized that the silence accumulated over the past months was about to tear me apart. And I gave in to emotions and I told my favorite parents everything I thought about my family. You ask why I'm angry? Because I don't exist in your fucking family. You live your own life. Parents have recently ceased to be interested in how I'm doing. You sit down to dinner separately, separate from me. When I get home, no one even yells, "Mark, hi, how you doing?" And no one asks me how I'm doing at school. Do any of you know that I'm captain of the high school basketball team? Did you know that I've been going to a music club for a year now and I've learned to play the guitar? Yes, I learned to cook food myself with the help of Google. And all because you are not near me. You then with your father, then with your mother, travel around the world, go to some countries and do not even tell where you rested? And I wasn't even taken once. And then you ask why I'm angry? Maybe because I'm not your family, I shouted. I was yelling so hard that I thought my lungs were going to explode from the strain. I blushed and my eyes were streaming with tears. The resentment I had accumulated over the years spoke to me. Alice just stood there looking at me and crying. She just said, "I'm sorry," in a low voice. "Is that all? I'm sorry?" I asked her. She roared louder than me, slammed the door to the room, and cried. I didn't know what was going on. It turns out that my parents were standing behind me. They looked very depressed. Mom was crying too, and then she and Dad took me to the kitchen. My father said they had a serious conversation for me. I was prepared to hear that I was not their own child, that they had taken me for a fool, and now they were sorry and I had to leave. Your sister has cancer, my mother said. She wept even louder. Dad put his arm around her, but he didn't look up from the floor. At that moment, I felt sick. I was prepared for anything but this news. Suddenly, I felt hurt, ashamed, and angry at the same time. She was diagnosed with the disease a couple months before you were born, and your dad and I threw all our energy into her treatment. Alice was looking forward to your birth. When you were in my tummy, she read you her favorite stories every day. In the countries we went to, she received chemotherapy, after which she was very ill for a while. She sometimes couldn't even walk on her own, so she often kept the door to her room closed or maliciously kicked you out. She just forbade us to tell you about it because she wanted you not to be sad, my mother said. Then she pointed out that she was very sorry for me because when they saved one child, they did not notice how they destroyed another, me. I don't think I felt any worse. You can't imagine how bad I felt at that moment. I thought of such terrible things. I hated Alice, and I did everything I could to offend her. I just looked at my parents and cried. My sister came up behind me and gave me a big hug. I couldn't say a word. She calmed me down and said it was all her own fault. I still love you, you stupid boy, she said, and laughed. That night, for the first time in my life, I had such a long, open, honest, and frank conversation. All I asked was that you let me take care of her. Now, in all her chemo sessions, I was there for her, feeding her, reading her books, playing the guitar, singing songs. A few more years passed. Alice still has to undergo intensive treatment, but I'm happier than ever because I can be near my sister, whom I love more than anyone in the world.
My name is Daniela. Not so long ago, I had my younger sister by the name of Chloe. I've been dreaming about this for so long because I was an only child in my family. But my joy was not long. After a while, terrible things started happening in our family, and I think my little sister was involved. Parents adopted her at an orphanage. My mother couldn't get pregnant for a long time, but when she did, the baby was born dead. The mother could not believe it, and for a long time she could not recover from such a shock, which served as a discord and a cold relationship with father. They could not have any more children. Everyone pretended that everything was normal so that it would not affect me in any way, but something in me remained, something that from time to time ached in my chest. My parents put it all down to childhood trauma, and they didn't tell me much about their life. They decided that you cannot live in the past and should not drown in grief, and a decent time has passed since this tragedy. I grew up and turned 15. My parents decided to revive their happy family. They finally had another long-awaited daughter, and I have a little sister. This was the path to harmony in the family. If someone can't have children and someone has lost their parents, then why not to help each other? To not brighten up the lives of people who have lost their most valuable things? After all, my parents took a long time to come to this. They had the strength and courage to adopt Chloe. She was 12 years old. My parents wanted a younger child, I will not hide it, but she was a gifted and capable child, which immediately attracted attention to her. Well-mannered, polite, talented, with a great interest in drawing and studying, and a good attitude to all adults and teachers of the orphanage. This set her apart from the noisy and naughty children. Her first day at school was very difficult for her. I supported her in every possible way and accompanied her to school lunch and recess. School children poked at her and called her a foundling. The latter made Chloe lose her temper, and she pushed one of the boys and ran out of the school crying. Months passed, and this boy had a fracture. He was riding at a considerable speed on his bike because he was afraid to get wet on the road because of the rain, and his joy was unlimited because this bike was stolen from him, and he found it a couple of days later in the back of the house. Maybe one of the boys joked, he thought. I thought so too, until I found out that the bike was faulty. His father said something about pedals, bearings, threads. I don't know the details. But I definitely suspect who is involved in this and who went to such a cruel act. It is not to pour a bottle of water on the offender and not to stain the chair with chalk. It was a deliberate intent to harm and take revenge on the person. But who would believe it? And I chose to remain silent, sometimes even doubting my perception. Until the chain of coincidences and accidents began, when children were fighting or getting into trouble, they were seriously injured and severely damaged. Chloe was always there and surprisingly not at all involved. This was a huge noise for our school because it was famous for its reputation of excellent, good, and decent students. The puzzle was quickly put together when, at the insistence of her mother, Chloe was told to stay away from such incidents and pay more attention to her studies, setting me as an example. It all quickly turned into a wild scandal. Mother first questions Chloe's poise, but father, who came home late from work, did not believe his wife and said that this was just a teenage rebellion and she overestimated the importance to it. In the morning, my mother found my dead kitty in her bed, which was clearly smashed with a rock. Immediately, my mother rushed into our room and pulled Chloe out of her bed, and she got up and smiled ominously, as if nothing had happened. Began to comb her hair in front of the mirror and asked what they could do to her. Beat her? Give her back? Daddy won't let me do that. He loves me. At worst, I'll accuse you of periodically beating me up. I hope we understand each other. After this conversation, my mother and I buried the animal. The parents' relationship began to deteriorate because he didn't like his wife's behavior toward Chloe. He wasn't there. He didn't know the whole truth. The final push to discord was the mother's argument that the shelter has no information about the origin of this sinister Chloe. It turned out that she was transferred from another orphanage that burned down in the fire. She was silent for a long time and did not answer questions. Nothing was preserved, and the decision was made to leave her, not to throw her out on the street. I haven't lived with my father since. They moved in with my grandmother. We see each other occasionally, but I don't know what's going on in Chloe's life. And today, I found out that my grandmother died from a gas leak. She did not like Chloe, considered her a stranger and negligent. They blamed it all on my unfortunate father, who long ago got drunk after the divorce and stopped caring for his daughter and participating in her life. It looked like an obvious murder, the motive being the house. Yes, and Chloe confirmed conflicts between her father and grandmother on the grounds of property. I didn't believe it because they had a great relationship. And why would he do that if the house was registered to him and she was helping him live? Just live. Everything was already on her slender shoulders. They decided to send Chloe to our house until she came of age. I wondered why all this was happening. Why is she coming back? No, I understand why. But what can we expect? Revenge? Reprisal? Retribution? What other surprises will present us with the fate of Chloe? Who is she and what is her purpose? I reread and saw a lot of stories about mental illness and abnormalities, movies about children from orphanages, but it all looks like fiction and fiction. No one believes them, and I understand them. I write this with fear and with tears in my eyes. I'm afraid for myself and my mother, and I'm afraid to even imagine the consequences. I'll have to live with her for 3 more years, 3 whole years, if I live to see this day.